What is up, Burn Nation, and welcome to the Burn Bootcamp podcast, the place where you get all your health, your fitness, your nutrition, your family focus, your business focus. We're taking your life to the next level. In the building today, I got Ashley Hearn.
What's up? Hi, guys.
All right, so if you don't know Ashley, can I give you a quick build up? I don't want to make you uncomfortable. She's very humble. She doesn't like me bragging on her, but she is responsible for training about 85%, 90% of our Burn Bootcamp trainers out there across 41 states in which we operate. She is the co-lead upstairs with her partner in crime, Ashley Beasley, and just one of the most on-point technical trainers that I've ever had the privilege to train. We've known each other for a very long time. I venture to say that the student has now surpassed the master, and I'm still pretty sharp on the mic, but if you take an Ashley Hearn camp, you're gonna get Burn Bootcamp experience at its highest, most flawless level. And part of that, a big part of that is being able to navigate our members who have had pregnancies, are pregnant, or who want to be pregnant.
Yep.
Right?
That's a big part of our population upstairs. Right now, we've got something's in the water at Lake Norman because it feels like every camp there are so many pregnant members, but that's the experience across Burn Nation, right? Yeah, it's a really important part of what we do.
So we're gonna dive deep into that.
Yeah, let's do it.
We're gonna dive deep into those kind of three areas. Like, what do I think about before I'm about to build a family and get pregnant for the first time? And when I am, and I'm in it, what are some considerations, all right? And then afterward, you and I both know that, hey, once you've had a baby, you're postnatal forever.
Forever,
and it's a constant care. And so you're the expert. I'm just gonna really try to dig into your brain and pull this out of you so that everybody at home can really take some notes.
Sounds great.
All right, so let's start. If I'm thinking about building a family, I'm a few years away from maybe getting pregnant for the first time or trying. What are some considerations as I'm thinking about that I should take into account?
Well, I think one of the most important things is that, we're trying to create a lifestyle upstairs in everything that we do. And so, being pregnant is a short part of your life, 9 months, right? Multiple times over the course of the years, but we want to be in the best shape possible when we get there, right? We can't foresee every possible circumstance that comes up when we're pregnant, but we can alleviate a lot of things that could happen as a consequence of pregnancy, negative consequences, by being in the best shape possible, right? So it is so important for women to be strength training. It helps with their strong bones, muscles, all of those things that are gonna be important. I mean, really and truly, one of the only considerations I would say that would be a concern is just making sure that we're in those years before pregnancy. We want to make sure we're not getting so lean, our body fat's so low that it impacts our cycle, right? And that's a really important thing, and a lot of women run into that in their journey to becoming pregnant. So that's one thing that we'll watch with our members, that they tell us hey, I want to try to get pregnant. These are something we're going to make sure that we're not doing so much, that we're leaning out too much, that it interferes with our hormones or things like that. But other than that, everything that we're doing while we're working out, while we're training, is just going to set us up for success once we are pregnant, so that we can have a healthy pregnancy and be healthy postpartum too.
Do you have maybe some examples of somebody who might have been fit their whole life and then had a pregnancy, or had gotten deliberately gotten into the best shape of their life in front of it, versus maybe somebody who didn't? You have to name names, but I want people to understand just the contrast in between, how much easier is it? Is it what actually happens to our muscles? Is it because we're able to control our muscle better? Is it because we're stronger? What's the reason?
I think just in general, when you're in that space, right, where you're in the best shape, we do have members that come in and they're like, I want to have a family, but I know that when you have babies, you are chasing babies all the time. It's taxing on your body. You're sleep deprived, all of those things. So setting yourself up for success, a lot of people are like, hey, I have this extra 20, 30 pounds. I don't want to add to that when I get pregnant, right? I want to get rid of that so that when I do get pregnant, I'm gaining a healthy amount of weight. I'm not taxing my joints by carrying too much weight, with extra weight and then pregnancy weight and all of those things. You got lax joints when you're pregnant as well. So I think I can probably think of a half a dozen examples of women who we've sat down in that first focus meeting when they've come into Burn, and we're like, hey, what brought you into Burn? And they're like, I want to get pregnant, I want to build a family, but I know that I'm not in the best shape that I need to be in right now. And so it's sort of setting a plan for them of getting in that place so that when they do get pregnant, they feel their best, and that if they do gain weight, if they do have those things that happen, happened during pregnancy. They're not experiencing high blood pressure or some of those other things that they might have had they had that extra weight on them before they got pregnant.
So there's like this correlation. There could be possibly a correlation with, excess body fat going into a pregnancy, and then that having a correlation with diabetes, what's it called?
Gestational
diabetes or any hypertension or anything like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Those things play a big role. And just, like if you've had a baby, right, that first trimester, you're already feeling tired, you're run down, all of those things. It helps so much when you are continuing to work out during that time with those energy levels throughout your pregnancy. I can tell you, I've had 3 babies, and with my first 2, I was really young and I didn't really work out much. With my third one, I was 13 years older than my first, but I was in the best shape of my life, and that pregnancy was totally different for me. I felt better. I had more energy. I experienced less nausea, all of those things, and I really think there was a correlation to my fitness level, my activity level before I was pregnant with her, and then while I was pregnant. It was a totally different situation.
Have you ever, and this has come to me before, I'm wondering if it's ever come to you as a trainer, have people that have the mentality that working out and the strain of that is actually dangerous. Like there's a danger to the strain of that. Can you help us understand that world?
Yeah, I think that was like kind of a myth back in the day. I really do think that there was a lot, even OBs and doctors would tell people like, oh, you take it easy. Like you're not going to work out. It's too much strain on your body. There used to be studies on like, don't get your heart rate so high. And over the last 15, 20 years, we've just gotten so much better at like what we know about the female body and pregnancy, and now those things have been debunked, right? And what we're seeing is that it's actually whatever you're doing before pregnancy, you can continue during pregnancy. And it actually, for I would say the majority of women, it improves their quality of life while they're pregnant.
Yeah.
And they're not saying it's a strain anymore. They're like, this is great for you. This activity level is actually going to prepare you for childbirth, right? And they're going to prepare you to recover more quickly afterward, which is obviously the goal, right? We want to get back to feeling normal as quickly as we can. And there's hormones and things in play with that. But that activity level, they're really, unless like, let's be clear, like obviously we have to always consult with their doctors, right? Because some people have other things going on that would indicate for them they may need to take it easier. They may not be able to continue with their normal activity level. But for a normal pregnancy, we'll say, that has been totally changed, and there is no heart rate that you can go that's too high or anything like that. We're going to modify some things because ultimately the goal is to train for life, not just for this 9-month period. So there's things we're going to take into consideration, and we're going to talk about that. But absolutely, there isn't any risk, right? As long as you were doing it before, there's any issues that your doctor's cleared you for. It's actually really wonderful for you.
Okay, good, awesome. So I wake up one day and, my name is Morgan Kline, and I'm feeling a little funny. I don't know really why I'm feeling a little funny.
Yeah.
But I have this like inkling that I, might be pregnant. So I go like, might be on the road in Florida, driving in between burn boot camp locations or something like that, and stop at like a store.
It's very specific.
And then like come out of the store and
like
have a negative test, but then get 2 more and do it later that night and get 2 positives and wake up in the morning and know that you're pregnant.
Right.
Right? Let's just say that happened.
Okay, let's just say.
Okay.
It's hypothetical.
I hugged Morgan. I said, "We got this.
Yeah.
We got this. Let's go." And that was our experience with finding out about Cam. And a woman finds out they're pregnant. They're the miracle.
Yeah.
It's happening inside of their body. Still, it's not very well understood, like how deep that goes, and like how I would say like the magic of being able to make life is just this incredible thing. Okay, so that's the all-consuming moment for both mom and dad, and I'm like, I'm at this crossroad now. I'm like, what do I do? I've never studied anything.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. I'm pregnant. It's my number 1 priority. Keep this baby safe.
Yep.
So let's break this up into trimesters, 1, 2, and 3.
I love that.
Let's start in trimester 1. I find out I'm pregnant. What's next?
Tell your trainer. Tell your trainer right away. I will say that if you're a burn boot camp member, tell your trainer ASAP, right? I get so upset when somebody will come to me and they're like, "Hey, I just want to tell you I'm pregnant." And I'm like, "How far along?" They're like, 18 weeks. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me this sooner? So your trainer will keep your confidence. I promise you that, right? But absolutely. So look, the first trimester, there's not a ton of things we need to modify. We have very conservative mods at Burn, and that's just because ultimately at the end of the day, it's risk versus reward, and we want to make sure the end goal is to keep mom, keep baby safe. So the only thing we take off the table in the first trimester is twisting, trunk rotation, just because that can lead to premature uterine contractions. It's a very conservative modification, but it's just not worth the risk, right? So that's the first thing we tell them. So if you come to me, you're Morgan Kline, you're like, hey, I just found out I'm 5 weeks pregnant, that's the first thing I'm going to say is congratulations, that's awesome. First thing, we're taking twisting off the table. So think of things like a Russian twist or a cricket climber, right? Anything like that. And we just give like a blanket mod at Burn. I'll always just say, hey, if twisting's no good, this is what you're gonna do. Because Sally may not want me to call her out, right? She may still be, like, they want to keep this private. It's very early on.
Right.
You are still working through the emotions of, oh my gosh, especially if it's your first baby, right? So we try to give that blanket statement and then just say, hey, if you hear me say this, I'm talking to you, right? And then the other thing we really have to think about in the first trimester, you can continue your normal activity level, but you're gonna be more fatigued, right? Especially in that first trimester, you may be experiencing some nausea. So hydration is gonna be extremely important. And then we also say any cramping or bleeding is a hard stop to whatever you're doing, right? It's not like I'm gonna go walk this off and come back. So even if you're not working out at Burn, right? If you're working, you're a runner or whatever, you're outside there, you should be working out at Burn. But even if you're not, right? That's a hard stop. Cramping, bleeding, we go see our doctor before we pick back up on that activity level, just because we want to be, it's better safe than sorry. But monitoring your fatigue, monitoring your energy level, sometimes working out will help with that energy level, right? You're feeling super fatigued, you come work out. It's not the time to push, right? It's listening to your body. If you need to hydrate, hydrate. You need to take a break. So I'm not yelling at my pregnant members, hey, Morgan, if you stop, I stop, right? That's not coming out of my mouth to her at this point because I know she's got to listen to her body and she's got to make sure she's feeling well enough to do it. And then hydration is just so important, right? Especially if you are vomiting, we got to make sure we're staying hydrated. But that's really it. First trimester is pretty simple. You can continue to do everything that you were doing before.
Okay, so there's no other time frame within the first trimester where, hey, we got to stop doing this particular exercise, or
just twisting.
I know I'm not supposed to twist, but if there's sit-ups in the protocol, let's say, I'm perfectly safe to do that.
Unless it's uncomfortable, right? And so that we say that a lot. Like, just because it's fine for you to do, if it feels uncomfortable to you, don't do it, right? Or if it makes you nervous. Like, we have some people that, you know, they want to start modifying right away. And honestly, it's to your comfort level. And if that's what you need to do to feel safe, to feel comfortable, to continue to move your body, then that's what we're going to do.
So when you say, hey, I'm not expecting my members who are pregnant to push it, to go, like when you say push it, like what level? So if I could say, all right, everyone, the RPE scale, the rate of perceived exertion, 0 means you're sleeping. If you're at a 10, that means you're pushing as hard as you can, you're sweating, your neck's bulging, you know, your brows are down, you're gritting your teeth, you're clenching your grip is clenched, and everything is very tense and active, and you're trying as hard as you could humanly try in the moment. Where are we at on that spectrum of 1 to 10 with somebody that finds out they're pregnant? What do you mean by, like, let's not push it?
Yeah, I think we try to live within like that 7, 8 range, right? Where they're still feeling like they're challenged, but they're not pushing so far that like they can't get out of bed the next day, right? Like they've overexerted themselves, or they feel like they can't take a break. But I think that's the biggest thing with our pregnant members. Like, if you feel like you need to stop for a second, catch your breath, and then go back into it, we're going to support that, right? So, but you know, a lot of our members, man, they still want to feel challenged. Right. They still want to feel like they're getting a great workout. And there's so many ways to do that while you're pregnant without going into like a danger zone, so to speak.
So moving into second trimester, let's keep that thread going, and then we'll pop back to any other considerations that you want to mention in second trimester. So as baby continues to develop, and you know, the classic OBGYN or doctor of the 80s would tell you, you know, hey, as you're growing, your abs are separating. You want to try not to contract those abs in a separated position and train them to be out of position. In a sense, how much of that is still accurate today, and what other considerations are you thinking about as, you know, getting out of the first trimester? You starting to show then, right? Like
typically,
around, like,
it depends.
Into first, beginning of second. As you're starting to show, and it's becoming visually real to everybody else. You're probably getting into isn't there like this feel-good stage too for a lot of women, where you start to feel good, and you know, what are some considerations that we should make when we start to feel good, but we also need to remember, hey, hold it back.
So that is the great part about the second trimester. Most women are feeling good, so they want to work a little bit harder, right? They're not as fatigued, they're not as nauseous. All of those things have kind of gone away. They've got good energy. So this is a great time for them to be working out. Yes, it is still very true that we don't want to train those muscles when they're out of that position, because we want to do our best to prevent diastasis recti. Now, some of that's genetic.
Yeah.
There's some of that we can't
control. Explain what that means for us.
So it's as that uterus grows, right, their abdominal muscles separate, and we don't want to train them in that separated position, because ultimately the goal is that they go back together, right? And for a lot of women, genetically, they're going to stay a small amount of separation. It's very common, but we don't want to do anything to add to that, if that makes sense. So a lot of times during the second trimester, and really it depends on each person. So when you're starting to show, that ultimately means that uterus is growing and those abdominal muscles are starting to separate. We start to look for coning. And so what that means is basically, if you've ever seen it, you'll be like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's when those abdominals, instead of being like a nice round belly, we start to see it kind of come up to like a point or like a dome. And that's the best way I know how to describe it. So that means we're engaging those muscles, but they're not together like they should be. So we start watching for that in core movements, anything where we're like front loaded, like down on the ground, like big push-ups, mountain climbers, power planks, anything like that. A lot of times I'll take my hand and I'll be like, hey, can I just feel your belly? And I'll rub my hand over their belly if it's still nice and round. In their second trimester, they're usually still good to be in that position. If not, sometimes we can just simply elevate them, right?
Yeah.
Come into a ledge, a box, something, and that takes the pressure off of those abdominal muscles enough to where we can continue to do that exercise. We watch for it a lot overhead. So that's one place people don't think about, right? Any kind of overhead press, overhead movement, a lot of times, that's a lot of core engagement. If you're doing a lift correctly, your core's engaged, right? So we're watching for that there. And as far as core work, we do start to shift away from traditional core work, crunches, things like that, and we go to a lot of oblique training and core stability work. So think Palloff presses, bird dogs, things like that, where we're still dead bugs, right? We're engaging that core, but in a way that's not causing those, we're not crunching, we're not causing those abdominal muscles to separate. Core stabilization is great for pregnant women because it really does help as we get closer to that third trimester, supporting your frame, and then labor and delivery.
When is the point in which it becomes dangerous to even check whether or not I'm coning? Like getting in positions to cone in the first place. When does that become a
third trimester? We're hardcore, not even going to be in those positions. We're not even going to risk it, right? A lot of times, second trimester, it sneaks up on us.
Okay, so you're trying to monitor that as soon as possible, and sometimes that happens into the second trimester.
20
so you just
weeks
be
is kind of a line too that we have upstairs. We kind of draw that line about halfway. So
20 weeks, no more prone positions.
Yeah, they're elevated. They're coming up, even if they're not coning, right? Because we just don't want to risk it, because it literally can be like overnight.
Yes.
You know, like all of a sudden you're not, and the next day you are. And so 20 weeks, if they're not coning up to that point, we'll let them stay in those prone positions. At 20 weeks, we're like hard and fast. We have a pregnant member upstairs right now, and I won't say her name, but she is a beast. She is a beast. It's her third baby. This is our second pregnancy with her. So we've done this before, so we already knew we're gonna have to pull her back, right? Because she wants to work so hard. And today we were doing like mountain climbers into a hurdle hop, and she's right at 21 weeks. And she was so frustrated because Bees was like, come on, you're not doing this anymore. You got to go elevated, you know.
Right.
But it's real, and she knows because she's done this with us before. We've told her all the things like, hey, you can modify now, or you can modify for the rest of your life. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, you know. And so, but we still, you know, we found a way to modify her, and she still got a great workout, right? She can still jump, she can still do all those things, but we're like, you're done with prone position.
So what I'm hearing you say then, just to give some recap to this moment, I've got two key dates, or two key points in time. As soon as I find out I'm pregnant, transverse rotations, twisting, off the table right away. First thing that goes. Second line is
20 weeks.
20 weeks. That's no more prone position, or no more facing the ground, or no more...
Got to be elevated or on your knees, things like that.
Limited overhead, weight training, things like that. Okay, good, I'm following. So then we're moving forward into the second trimester. What else am I looking for in that transition from 2 to 3?
We also keep people off the ground, or coming off the ground. So pull-ups, we're done. That's a lot of core anyway.
Got it.
But we're not going to, anything with the fall
same
wrist.
20-week line there?
Yeah, same 20-week line. Like we do like plyometric step-ups or box jumps, things like that.
How do I keep my back strong? Because I'm somebody that was priding myself in pull-ups, and you know, it takes a long time.
We have the suspensions, right? So we use those a ton for our pregnant members, a ton. They can do a lot of the same movements, even with burn bars. Like we have our burn bars. Some of them can still do that. all the way up till their 3rd trimester. And then we have tons of dumbbells. There's lots of ways to make your back strong using dumbbells. So, but we utilize our suspension trainers all the time. So that's a great piece of equipment for because they can literally use that all the way till they deliver.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so 3rd trimester, and then we'll go into what like some postpartum care looks like, and there's some phases there too, right?
Sure. Yep.
All right, so finish us out with the 3rd trimester. What considerations are we making now that, I mean, you know, and you've seen the super pregnant women. They're just in the gym, they're super pregnant, they're there, you can tell they're, you know, getting to the point where, hey, it's starting to get a little bit uncomfortable. You get the cute little mom waddle going for some people, and, you know, this is really a time to like, hey, like this is the really important time right now to make sure that you're staying strong, but also not pushing it to exhaustion,
Yes.
Okay.
So this is probably the hardest for a lot of women, right? Because they are starting, this is when you get tired again, your body, it's heavy, you're not sleeping as well, so you're kind of back to some of those feelings in the 1st trimester. The biggest thing we take off the table, and I just really encourage every pregnant woman out there to listen to this, stop jumping in your 3rd trimester. So I was a runner with my last one, and I ran all the way up till about 36 weeks, and I wish I hadn't, right? Because that is so much impact on your pelvic floor, right? And so we take jumping, that includes jump rope. And I've seen videos out there of really pregnant women doing double unders, and it's that mantra, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? And so it's hard to pull yourself back from that, but that impact on your pelvic floor with that extra weight, sometimes you are doing irreparable damage, right? And we don't want you to have to go to PT after this is done, right? So we take jumping off the table. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get a great cardio workout, get your heart rate up. Sometimes that does mean we have to modify the protocol a little bit. We're going to give you paddle ropes and med balls and dumbbells to swing or things like that, where we're still elevating that heart rate, but our feet are planted. We take running off the table. And that's hard. So floor sprints, we're not doing that anymore. If we go outside to run, we're not doing that anymore. That's probably the biggest thing in the 3rd trimester that's a change, because we've already sort of started modifying our core work. We're also, like, sometimes for pregnant women, if they haven't been coning up to this point in like strength training overhead movements, they'll start now. Sometimes decreasing the load is all we need to do, right? Like we could go from 2 dumbbells and a press to 1 and they're fine. But some, they have to completely stop overhead movements. So we're going to train the shoulders in different ways than we were. We're going to do front raises, lateral raises, you know, rear delts. We're just not going to go overhead presses, things like that. And then the last thing that I don't think a lot of people think about is a lot of times unilateral movements are not great for pregnant members. Think lunges, things like that. Sometimes that pubic symphysis, I can't speak today, bone starts to irritate and rub, and so that's uncomfortable, and they're off balance. So like a lunge, sometimes giving them a burn bar to hold on to or things like that, but a lot of times we're going to keep both feet on the ground. Both feet planted.
Good. Well, listen, I mean, that's pretty prescriptive right there, right? And I think so just to recap, it's no twisting.
Yes.
As soon as you find out.
As soon as you find out.
20 weeks.
Nothing prone position.
Nothing prone position.
Elevate.
Yeah. 3rd trimester. No jumping.
Yeah, those are the biggies.
Including running. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So those are the big ones.
Those are the big
ones. And maybe we can do a follow-up, and maybe in another hour we can spend together. We can go into like some more considerations, because we could spend all day in
we could.
thousands of exercises.
These are the basics,
These
right?
are the basics.
These are the basics.
We want to keep you guys safe.
Core work too, obliques, stability. That's what we're working on in core.
Okay, so everything goes smooth. I listen to Ashley Hearn the entire time. She gets me so smoothly through my pregnancy. As smooth as possible. I'm strong. I'm a beast, but baby's also safe. I have a smooth delivery, and now baby's here. And we usually have how long of a period of time? Really like a 12-week
they can
initial
come
recovery?
Back in 6 weeks. So for burn anyway.
Okay, so talk to me about that. What's recovery time frames?
So first you got to go to see your OB. Got to get your doctor's approval that you can start working out again, right? Because a lot of things happen during the delivery. We want to make sure your doctor clears you. You're all good. 6 weeks and with a doctor's note is our policy. And I will say OBs are clearing women like sooner and sooner and sooner, and I'm really shocked by it. Like 4 weeks, they'll have a doctor's note, and we say 6 weeks. But when they come back 6 weeks, we're not just picking right back up where we were before we were pregnant. We are almost kind of thinking like the way you were modifying in your 3rd trimester, we kind of pick back up there, right? So there's a couple of considerations. We go back to the cramping, bleeding, hard stop, right? Immediately stop, go see your doctor, make sure everything's good. So there's a couple of things. Your pelvic floor is still weak, right? You've just delivered a baby 6 weeks ago.
Can you, just for those of us that don't, we assume we might know what that means, but what is the pelvic floor actually?
So it's the muscles that support, right, in your pelvis, that support everything in your abdominal wall, right? So when you have a baby, you think about that weight is sitting right down onto that pelvic floor. So think bladder control, that's really important for your pelvic floor. There's all kinds of, your organs are supported by your pelvic floor, right? So when we're jumping and we're impacting and all that, and even when we stop jumping at our third trimester, you still have that weight sitting there. There are people with pelvic floor dysfunction that have never had a baby. It can happen to men, right? Excessive weight, things like that can cause it as well. So does that help hopefully color that for you 100%. A little bit? But it's still weak, right? It still has to recover from 9 months of carrying extra weight on your pelvic floor. So we're going to go back
and there's inevitably going to be some type of damage during the pregnancy.
There's going to be some. Even if you follow to the letter of the law, right, you're still going to have a little bit of damage because birth is traumatic. I mean, it really is. And so think through that. Sometimes we don't jump right away again. And so a lot of pregnant women, when they come back, they're experiencing a little bit of incontinence. And that's very common. It's not normal, but it's common. And so we want to give your pelvic floor time to recover. So if you come back and you're experiencing that incontinence, we're going to back off jumping again.
What is that again?
Like leaking of urine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're peeing on yourself.
Oh, okay.
It's not double unders.
Sorry, I didn't get the scientific term for that right away.
I was trying to be,
well, because usually when members come up to me, they're like, Devan, can you help me modify this? Because I'm peeing my pants a little bit. And I'm like, well, you're sweaty. It'll just blend in.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I should be instructing them to do some, to set the jump rope down and do maybe some exercises in the moment there, or is this more of like a rehab PT type thing?
Well, if it persists, right? It's pretty common right after birth. So I would say if you're persisting in that 12 weeks postpartum, it may be time to consult a PT.
Okay.
Yeah, because it is common in the beginning, right? And so we're going to watch it. Does this persist? Does it keep going? Then there may be a little bit of damage that needs rehab.
Okay.
And that's when you do consult a pelvic floor physical therapist. And there are so many out there that are wonderful that can give it's little exercises to do that can strengthen your pelvic floor, because we do want to be able to jump without peeing our pants.
And have you heard stories of women maybe that are postpartum at whatever stage of that?
Oh yeah.
10 years, 20 years,
totally.
Right after, like actually go do pelvic floor exercise and then they stop the incontinence?
We have incontinence. There you go.
Yeah, got it.
We have a pelvic floor therapist that we partner with, and so we send a ton of people her way, and it is just remarkable the difference that they experience.
Okay.
So, and look, a lot of times diastasis, which is the separation of the abdominal muscles, right, and pelvic floor dysfunction are connected.
Okay.
So a lot of times if somebody says, hey, I'm peeing myself every time I jump rope, I'm like, let's check for diastasis. And so that's persistent after delivery too. So we also have to think about that from our core work perspective. We're not jumping right back in to crunches. Weighted abdominal work, we say nothing for the first 12 weeks.
Okay.
So even if you come back and your abs have just gone right back together, we're not adding extra weight, right? Because those muscles are still recovering as well.
They're still slightly separated.
Yeah, totally. Yes. So we'll check a lot of times, and I definitely, you can check yourself. You can really check yourself for this. There's tons of YouTube videos on how to do it.
Like the finger tests, the 1 finger, 2 finger, 3 finger.
Girls Gone Strong has so many great links for postpartum. That's where my certification is in, pre and postnatal training. And they have so many free links for pregnant women or postpartum women to check. So check. Ask your OB to check you. A lot of them don't check for that, but it's a really important thing for us to know, right? Yeah. Because if those muscles are still out here, we don't want to train them there, just like we did when we were pregnant. Yep. So we're going to start modifying again, just the way we did when we were pregnant for core, overhead movements, pull-ups, those same exact things that we took off the table. We're going to take them off. And then the jumping thing, one more thing. So relaxin is present. Relaxin is that hormone that the body starts producing when you're pregnant to help your hips open up and separate for birth, for delivery. But it impacts all your joints. It doesn't just impact your hips, right? So think knees, ankles, back, all of that stuff, elbows, wrists. So it stays present for at least 6 months. And if you're nursing, sometimes longer. Okay. And so you've got lax joints. And if you come back into full range of motion movements, jumping hurdles, things like that right away, you're risking injury too. So we always want to be careful about that and the load that you're picking up. We're going to ease back into that too.
So you're almost just reverse engineering. Yeah. So like the event is having baby, and then you're basically reversing. You're going starting back where you left off, and you're walking backward. Okay. And so then how long does that process usually take? Is it 12 weeks, 6 weeks?
Yeah, we say
just on
12.
average.
12 is considered, 12
where
weeks
you're back,
is
like,
considered
full at
your
it?
fourth trimester,
Okay.
right? So 12 weeks is your fourth trimester. Some women will need longer for that on certain things, right? If they do have diastasis, that could take a year, right,
Yep.
to repair. They may need to consult a PT to repair it. But for the I would say average across the board, by week 12, we can start adding back in some jumping. We can start doing more core work. If there is no diastasis, we can add some weight to core, things like that.
So as somebody who is trying to really understand this fourth trimester ideology, I love it. I love it. You said that's the first time I've ever heard anyone say, "Hey, there's a fourth trimester," and you get beyond that, right? And you recover or you think that you recovered, or maybe you get beyond that and you feel normal, but then you didn't really have this education, you didn't have this podcast, you don't even know what a pelvic floor is, you don't diastasis, what? Like, what does that mean? Like, you're just hearing this stuff for the first time. Obviously, the medical industry isn't concerned with retraining your abdominals to go back to place.
Right.
And so, is it ever too late? Like, do we ever get to the point where like pelvic floor's gone? I've been training this thing.
Never too late.
Okay, and so what are some? Just give me like an idea of what a PT might tell me to do if I have both problems. Is there like just a core exercise that you could not prescribe to somebody, but just explain a core exercise that might fix diastasis recti? That might.
I'll be honest. My answer is always, I'm not a PT, so that's outside of my scope of practice as a personal trainer.
Okay, so you're not. We shouldn't listen to you because you're not a PT. We should not listen to anything you say. All right, disclaimer. Now, what do you think?
One really good thing that sounds like is like glute bridges and glute tucks. Those are so beneficial to your core and strengthening your pelvic floor. Squats are another one. And typically they're very small movements, right, that we're doing. So like, we're not trying to like extend our hips up as high as we can. It's literally tucking your tailbone and like squeezing and activating everything. Connecting breaths, even just learning how to breathe in a way that engages your core. So think like diaphragmatic 360 breathing versus like up and down. Just connecting that core and engaging it in everything you're doing can help decrease that range of motion too. So those are probably two little ones, but I do always say, listen, consult a PT, because ultimately they're gonna be able to assess your specific case, right? Because they're not all the same.
Right, okay. What about unilateral stuff after we get, can we start introducing that back right away? Because as you said, no.
Yeah, well, your joints are still really lax. So we do want to be careful. Like, I'm probably not going to be like, let's do jump lunges, plyometric and unilateral. That's probably not going to be the best place to start. But for some women, they're fine to go right back to it. So there is a gray area of like, your body's different than my body is different than someone else's body. And they may be like, hey, that feels fine. That feels great to me. It's not bothering me at all, But we're just going to watch our range of motion. We're not going to jump right back into like full on jump lunges, heavy squat or heavy weights on a walking lunge, things like that. We'll progress back up to that. And
my last question to kind of complete this cycle is, now I go on to baby number 2.
Yeah.
And is there an ideal, like from an anatomical, biological perspective, an ideal amount of time for the body to like fully recover where there's no... Not that you ever fully recover from, I get you're always postpartum in a sense, but do you biologically recover to where there's no more relaxin left in the body, to where your joints are fully back together, to where, you've got enough time to rehab, just as a general philosophy?
I don't know if there's a specific, there may be, we could certainly do the research and find, like there might be like a number, but it really depends, because if you nurse for a year after the baby, your hormones are not going to be the same as someone who doesn't nurse at all, right? Because that's going to prolong some of these hormonal things that are going on in your body. Your nutrition stores are going to be depleted in a way that someone else who maybe didn't nurse at all is not going to be. Yeah. So it's not, I don't know that there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that, just because everybody has such different experiences, and you have nursing as a part of the postpartum experience, which does create all kinds of different issues from a hormonal perspective. A lot of our members, I'll find we're doing focus meetings, they're still nursing a year later. It takes a good 6 months post stopping nursing for their hormones to kind of level back out. Like if they're trying to lose body fat, that's the best example. Like I know there's this like, oh, nursing helps you lose weight. I've really not experienced that much in our population. And I've been doing this for 7 years. It seems like it's more the opposite. Like a lot of women hold on to body fat while they're nursing. And it'll sometimes take 6 months or more for us to start to see the needle move again.
Got it.
So there's all those factors that come into play. I'm sure there's probably a biological answer out there that I just don't know.
I was just genuinely curious.
I am
if
curious
there's
too. Now
some
that you
type
say
of
that,
window to where, like hormonally, you may restore back to somewhat normal.
I'm sure there is, but again, I think probably
it has to do with like when you stop breastfeeding.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for letting me just ask all the questions that came to my mind. This was super informative for me as somebody who's always trying to get better and serve members better. You're the expert, right? So I turned to you for this, and I more practically know how to train pregnant women rather than like technically know.
Yeah.
And you are so good technically that
it was just really important for me to learn
put those two things together.
Because I think the first year I started training, it was like one of those years where it was just like in the water, and I didn't know. And just personal training certification doesn't deal specifically with like females as a population or pregnant members as a population, right? And so for me, I was like, I've got to know this stuff because I don't ever want to be negligent because I just didn't know. So really started to dig into that, and Ashley Beasley, she's phenomenal at it too, and we've just over the years just learned so much about it. And for me, from a continuing education standpoint, the research changes a lot all the time. We got to be up to date on that. And I think the fitness industry is just getting so much better at this, of understanding that a male and a female body are not the same, and there's going to be different things to consider when we're training them, and pregnancy and postpartum is one of those things.
Yeah, this has been mind-blowing for me. I've learned so much. I have a feeling this is going to be one of the more replayed podcasts just because we just went, like 40 minutes of you spouting off information after information. I know trainers are going to listen to this and play this back a few times over so they can absorb everything that you had to say today. And I appreciate you being here. This was really informative.
I would love to. And if you have questions, if you're pregnant out there and you're like, hey, can I do this? Can I not do this?
Tell them your Instagram handle.
Yeah, it's just Hearn Ashley. Hearn like learn, Hearn. Everybody gets it wrong. Hearn Ashley. And reach out to me. It's, I would love to answer your questions. I do get members in Burn Nation that reach out to me, and I love it. I love it. So don't hesitate to ask. Happy to help with that.
Okay, everybody, you heard it from the expert herself. We're excited to have you guys here today. Thanks for being here. I know you could be anywhere else in the world, but you chose to be with us today. For that, we're forever grateful. We mean that from the bottom of our hearts.
Yes.
And we're going to let you take us out 2 claps on 2. But before we do that, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, all right? Listen, we're up to like 100 now. We're growing. You guys are supporting. I love it. We love you. Take us out, Ash.
2 claps on 2. 1, 2.